Hi, welcome to the Qwipster Film Review Podcast. My name is Vince Leo, and I'm the host of this show. I've been doing this show since 2015, and I have a question. This is a different episode, I guess, than any of that you've heard before. This is a checking in with the listeners out there. Now, back in 2015, I was a single person. I was not a father. I was able to go to the theaters anytime I wanted. I lived in a town that had movie theaters that showed all of the major new releases and a lot of independent films. So I was able to be very comprehensive in terms of movies that are out in theaters and letting people know what they're about. Unfortunately, my lifestyle now is not very conducive to being able to go to the movie theaters every day. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I live in a town now that actually has no movie theaters that currently show new releases. I'm doing another podcast that covers films in the 1980s that has grown to be very time-consuming in terms of how much time I spend doing research for those episodes. And people who listen to that show are very loyal, and I want to make sure that I do a quality show. Unfortunately, all of that has taken its toll on this particular podcast. I don't necessarily want to shut down this podcast. I mean, I could keep going just doing random movies that I may occasionally watch. But at that point, I don't really know what the podcast is. You know, there's no rhyme or reason to the movies that I may decide to watch necessarily. So I guess the question that I have for you is, would you want me to continue doing the show the way that I'm doing it, where I watch only a few movies a year and I do podcast episodes on them? Or would you rather I change the show to do another niche? You know, I have 80s movies podcast. Would you like to hear a 90s movies podcast on this show? A lot of the film history of that, or maybe go earlier, 70s or 60s or 50s or what have you. Would you rather I concentrate on certain types of films? Maybe do a broad-based science fiction film podcast, or superhero films, or thrillers, or maybe just concentrate on great directors, go through a particular director's filmography, and then when I'm done with that director, I move on to another one. If you're somebody who listens to the show, and this is why I'm doing a podcast episode on it, is because I can go right to you, the listener. What kind of show could I do that you would be really interested in listening to? You may have ideas of your own. And so this is me reaching out to you, since you've been listening, perhaps for a while, perhaps many years. That's who I want to hear from. If you have your own thoughts on where you would like the show to go, if you want it to continue without change, or if you want me to head off into a new frontier, you can reach out to me by writing an email to me at qwipster@gmail.com, QWIPSTER@gmail.com. You have followed me on Twitter. You can send me a note there. Instagram, wherever you might currently follow me, send me a note. Let me know what you think about the show. I can even do all independent films, whatever it is. I guess I would like to do the kind of show that the listeners of this podcast want to hear, and not necessarily be doing another podcast episode on, Godzilla versus Kong, like 300 other podcasts are currently doing. Do you really need to hear one more podcast talking about something you've heard on 20 other podcasts already this week? Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I do encourage you to write to me, Qwipster@gmail.com. Just remember that Qwipster is spelled with a W instead of a U.